This Church Leader Tool is the second in a four-part series summarizing the wonderful little book, Your Leadership Edge. And I made the comment last week that this book has really surprised me, and as I get deeper into it, I'm finding all kinds of value in it. So last week, we summarized the first section of the book, which was Diagnose Situation. That's the first section. And then this next section is Manage Self. The third section we'll do next week is Energize Others, and then it'll end with Intervene Skillfully. And as I summarize section 2, Manage Self, what I really like about this is many times leaders want to jump in and interact with others and address the situation. But the first thing we really need to do is look at ourselves and understand our role in any leadership situation. So let's dive into Manage Self. And like the first section, this second section has 6 small chapters that break up this idea of Manage Self. So the first of those is Know Your Strengths, Vulnerabilities, and Triggers. So your strengths are those things which come naturally. You can easily do those things because they're natural strengths. Lean into them, and then be aware of your vulnerabilities. And the book makes a distinction between weaknesses, which you can work on, and vulnerabilities, which are wounds and just a part of how you are created as a person. And acknowledging our vulnerabilities either lets us avoid them or lean into those areas of brokenness from which we can minister. And then triggers are just those things that set us off, the unique way that we are put together. And I love how the book has a quote by Viktor Frankl. Frankl became famous for his therapeutic observations in the awful situation of a concentration camp, and his acknowledgement in the one thing that we do have the ability to do in any situation is how we respond. And that's a way to think about our triggers. How can we respond as we choose in those situations? To learn our strengths, vulnerabilities, and triggers, we could employ a coach. We could talk to a trusted person and ask them to reflect and help us see them. And we can spend time reflecting on those things in our own lives. So that's the first step, to manage yourself. And then second, get used to uncertainty and conflict. Acknowledge that these are going to be a function of leadership, particularly in conflict. I've always liked the phrase that with motion comes friction. That's just built into being a leader. And since you know that it's going to happen, know it's coming, you can also try not to take it personally because it's just built into the function of leadership. We talked particularly in the first section about adjusting the temperature, not making it too high or too low, but having that place where conflict is productive and things are growing from that. And really what you do is you learn to manage conflict and not avoid it. I love how the book actually uses an example from church of someone who is frustrated by another person who appears to be blocking progress. And the book suggests to lean into this. Spend some time talking to them. Maybe you'll have the opportunity to convince them, but at the very least, even if that doesn't happen, you'll understand better where their resistance is coming from. So that's the second one. Then the third one is choose among competing values. We all have values, and they are very often revealed in our choices and our behavior. So we can take time on the balcony to observe how we are spending, for instance, our time, our money, and our energy, and that will help us see our values. We can also ask others about what they observe, what they see in us and our organization. And we usually have to acknowledge that there are often more than one good competing values and have to navigate them. For example, here's a classic one in the church. In churches, we often end up navigating the needs and desires and wishes of those who are already members, while at the same time, and sometimes competing value of the needs and wishes and desires of people who are not yet members. These are both good values, but a church that over-focuses on one or the other will not remain long-term healthy. So we have to navigate those competing values. And then on into the fourth thing, know the story that others tell about you. And this can sometimes be uncomfortable. Sometimes we have to face some hard things about ourselves. To really know how we are seen by others, we can ask for honest feedback from others and non-defensively take that in. We can pay attention to the indirect, the nonverbal feedback that we often get about ourselves. And then when we know how we're seen by others, then we can start to address this in our own leadership. And the fifth thing about managing self is experiment beyond our comfort zone. Start with small experiments that move us beyond those things that are comfortable for us. Some indicators we're in that zone might be that we feel a little bit incompetent. We don't know exactly what we're doing. We may feel a little bit stressful or anxious in those places. We may consciously know we are going into a new area and feel these things. We can sometimes practice this by meeting with someone who makes us uncomfortable, knowing that that's going to stretch us a little bit. We can be curious, ask some questions, explore some things that we normally would not do. Or if we're normally the kind of person who jumps in right away, consciously wait and observe and step back from it. Or if we're the kind of person who normally steps back, then consciously step into it. I love how the book includes this wonderful little poem by Wendell Berry, Our Real Work. The poem goes, "It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work, and that when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings." And then number 6, take care of yourself. And there are some other church leader tools on this topic, but it's always good to remember that we can damage our own health when we're not taking care of ourselves, and that we're not fully engaged and as effective as we could be as when we are being healthy. We need to be healthy physically, we need to be there emotionally, we need to be there spiritually, and also mentally. It includes things like eating well and exercising and sleeping well and taking time off, vacation and days off and Sabbath. It means having good relationships with the people in our lives, relationships that help us grow and be healthy. And it also means knowing ourselves well enough to know when we're getting out of the healthy zone that that's where we are and stepping back into it. Well, again, I hope that this second section on managed self has been a blessing. Next time, we'll move on to the third section, and that's energize others, where we start interacting with others. As always, if this church leader tool has been a blessing to you, I'd invite you to pass it on to somebody else as they're growing in managed self. Take care and God bless.